Good evening, friends. The sun is set, and I'm back with another tale from my collection. Now it's time to dim the lights if you dare, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Mountain Dreams. Rising before the sun, he sipped at his coffee and tried to wake up. His flanks hurt as if his kidneys were trying to beat their way out, or like someone had been punching him there repeatedly as he slept. Smoke curled lazily above the desk where he sat, flowing from the cigarette held between two tired fingers. He knew he should really quit, but he didn't want to. The cigarettes were one of his only pleasures in life now. Taking a deep drag, he watched the smoke curl from the burning ember as he inhaled, and twin streams of smoke jetted to either side from his nose. No, he did not want to quit. In fact, he was fond of telling people who chided him to quit that he had been smoking since he was 13 and would stop the same way his grandmother did. Of course, they always asked how she quit, hopeful they would find a way to inspire him to give up the bad habit. With a laugh and a twinkle in his eye, he would always cheerfully respond. My Oma was sitting in her rocking chair by the fire at my uncle's house one winter's night, with her son, a couple of grandsons, and even a great-grandson. They were talking of old times when she was younger and strong, long before she had the first of several open-heart surgeries, when her grandsons were still children. Happy memories from almost a lifetime before. While she spoke perfect English, her talk was interspersed with words of her native German, despite having left the country more than 50 years before. But no one cared, because this was Oma, and you were just as likely to converse with her in German as you were English, depending on the occasion. She said she wished she could walk the old mountains of Bavaria, as she had done in her childhood some 80 years before, and then kind of looked off wistfully into the fire glowing above the hearth. After one last puff of her Pall Mall non-filter cigarette, she crushed it out in the ashtray, closed her eyes, and leaned back to relax in her rocking chair. At that moment, she quit smoking after 60 years. He chuckled to himself. Each time he told that little story, people would turn away in frustration. It was his life. He would do as he pleased. Looking at the clock, he saw he had to leave in about 30 minutes so he would be on time for work. He sat up straight, trying to stretch his old back muscles, and felt the familiar twinge as his old back injury strained against his stretching. Finally, it loosened, and the pain in the back of his ribs began to subside. He was coming to life. Getting up from his chair, he moved silently through the dark house to his bathroom. Pulling the door closed gently, he waited to turn on the light until it was closed so he would not wake his wife. She did not have to be up for another 2 hours for her work and needed her rest. He quickly washed his face and hands and put his dentures in. He detested the false teeth, but put up with them so he could eat and interact with others. Just another facet of growing older, he thought to himself. He stepped into the closet and put on a work shirt. Opening his dresser, he grabbed a pair of socks and let his hand linger over the pouch laying under them. It was his money stash, a tidy sum he had saved for a rainy day. He turned off the lights and opened the bedroom door. Sitting on the edge of the bed to put his socks on, he listened to the calm breathing of his wife. He wanted to say the heck with work and just climb back into bed with her, but knew he must keep going to pay for their life. With a sigh, he wandered into the kitchen to grab a breakfast shake and an energy drink. He was fond of energy drinks, as the increased caffeine and other additives gave him the energy he needed to get through the day. Back at his chair in the garage, he pulled on his pants before sitting down to put his work boots on. It seemed hard to believe that he was still working like this as he approached 60 years old. but that was life. You either work hard when you're young and squirrel away nuts to eat when you're too old to work, while missing out on things you'd rather be doing, or you do those things until you were too old and settled into work and survive until you were done. He had enjoyed life and thus had to work now. Thoughts of the day to come filled his head, but he pushed them away in favor of thoughts of better times. Work would be there when he got there. No sense giving it more attention than it deserved. He glanced at the clock. 15 minutes and he would have to head out to his truck. He was thankful for the 15 minutes to relax. Lighting a smoke, he sipped at his second cup of coffee and let his mind wander. He soon found himself wandering in the mountains of Colorado with a bow in his hand, searching for majestic elk. In his mind's eye, he could see the bright autumn colors of the aspens and hear the distant bugling of elk. Coming to a small mountain stream he had crossed many times before, he turned and followed it up to the source, where he took a long drink of the crisp, cold mountain spring water. He took the last drag from his cigarette as he looked at the clock. 5 more minutes and it was time to go to work. He did not want to, and gave consideration to sending a message to his supervisor that he was calling out sick today. No, that wouldn't do. He only had 5 minutes before he had to leave, but that was okay. He crushed out the smoke in the ashtray, closed his eyes, and sat back in his chair. How he missed the mountains and clean, cool air. His thoughts turned back to look at how he had first come to be in the mountains at all. He grew up in a small Texas town close to the Gulf Coast, a long way from the mountains, and in fact, he had never even really considered the mountains, as he loved the life of fishing in the bayous and the beach. It seems, though, that destiny knew he belonged in the mountains. Looking back, he recalled how he had become involved with the girl who became his daughter's mother around his 17th birthday. At the time, it seemed they should be together, and since he was already out of school, he worked with her brothers in construction. Then her father invited them to go to Colorado with him to work construction. As if a light went off in his head, he realized then that he had too much life to live before being tied down, and they parted ways. She went with her father. Not even 6 months later, he joined the Army, and after basic training and school in Alabama, he found himself stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. He could still recall the impact seeing Cheyenne Mountain looming above had on him when he stepped from the bus at his first duty station. It was incredible, and it sparked a love for the mountains he had to this very day. He spent the next 3 years exploring everything the mountains had to offer for a young man who loved to fish and hunt. He also met and married his wife there, and it occurred to him many times since that destiny knew he was meant to be there. His wife's father was a contractor, and he worked with him, learning even more of the trades. When his first tour in the Army was done, they returned to Texas. He found it difficult to find good work at the time and eventually re-enlisted in the Army after spending the spring and summer playing on the beach with his wife. She had never seen a beach before he brought her there, and it was the first in a long line of firsts he was able to introduce her to. It was one of the most wonderful summers they had. The Army reclassified him and sent him to engineering school, with a bonus of duty station of choice since he was prior service. Wanting to be near the mountains once again, but also wanting to be near the coast, he chose Fort Lewis, Washington as his duty station. They would have the best of both worlds. There was no doubt destiny had a hand in his life when he found himself at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado for engineering school. He and his wife were expecting their third son, and he was able to introduce guys from school to the mountains he loved. At the end of school, there was no slot for him in Washington, so they sent him back to Alabama. He yearned for the mountains, but not enough to keep him from enjoying where he was. He and his wife explored the coast of Florida, fishing and playing on the beaches, and in the fall, he enjoyed hunting in the woods around Fort Rucker. While he did not have the mountains, he still had woods and beaches in close proximity. It seemed destiny gave him what he wanted after all. When he left the Army again after nearly 10 years, they returned to Colorado, where he worked with his father-in-law until his passing. Again, he was in the mountains he loved, but as time wore on and things changed, there were more people, and he had to go further and further to do what he loved until it became tiresome. With the loss of his wife's father, he tried to keep it going, but soon found himself missing the old days. It was then they decided to return to Texas. He opened his eyes and looked at the clock. It was time to go. He stood up and grabbed his phone to put it in its holster. Then, a sudden longing for the mountains overcame him, and he found himself sending his supervisor a message. He was calling out sick today. Putting his phone in its holster, he drank the last of his coffee and took a minute to write his wife a short note. I'm taking some of my vacation days this week to go fishing up in the mountains, and maybe do a little hunting. I didn't want to wake you. I'll call later today and let you know where I am. I thought about waking you up to go with me, but you always say freshwater fishing is boring and probably wouldn't want to go. If you decide you do want to come along, I'm leaving enough in the cash stash for you to hop in your truck and catch up with me. Love you. Quietly, he went into the closet and stuffed some clothes in the duffel bag with his sleeping bag and other camping gear. Then he grabbed his tent and fishing gear from the closet and put them in his truck. Last to go in was his favorite hunting bow and backpack with field supplies. He stopped for a moment to consider if there was anything else he needed, and realized he forgot the money. Going to his drawer, he took all of the rainy day fund except for a few $100s in case his wife decided to join him. He gently kissed her and hugged her as she slept. She responded by wrapping an arm around him. He said quietly, "I got to go. Love you," and slipped from the room. As his truck rolled from the driveway, he thought to himself that this was really an irresponsible way to take a vacation. But it was not like he did this kind of thing a lot, and he needed a break. He needed to quell the yearning for the mountains that had been itching at him for several years now. Besides, his son lived with them now, and he could help his mom with anything that needed done for a few days. Sure, they might miss him at work, but he was not essential personnel, so it would cause no problem there. He pointed the truck in the right direction and let her roll. Sitting outside his tent, looking up at the stars while the fire crackled, he breathed deep of the crisp mountain air. The scent of pine trees and imminent snowfall brought back memories of previous hunts, flooding his mind as he tried to decide whether he would fish or hunt first in the morning. It was deer and elk season, as well as kokanee salmon season, and there were sure to be some big trout following the salmon around. He decided he would make up his mind in the morning, and drifted off to sleep beside the fire as he wondered what was happening back in Texas. His son stumbled through the house to get ready for work and stopped in front of the coffee pot. Dad had left it on for him as usual, and as he poured himself a cup, he looked out the window over the sink and was surprised to see the old man's truck in the driveway. He was usually gone to work by this time. Taking his coffee to the garage, he turned the corner from the laundry room and saw his dad leaning back in his chair against the wall. His coffee cup was empty, and there was no cigarette burning in the ashtray. He wondered if maybe he was fighting a migraine, as that was usually the only reason he would stay home from work. He was distracted by the cat at his feet, and after setting his coffee on the desk, reached down to pick her up. He sat in his chair and allowed the cat to nuzzle and snuggle for a few minutes before reaching for his coffee. He looked at his dad and couldn't tell if he was breathing. Concerned, he said aloud, "So why are you staying at home today?" There was no response, and he put the cat down as he leaned closer. It was then that he realized that the old man had finally quit smoking. Thank you for spending your time with me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. That's all for now, but I'll be back again soon with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.